Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Path to Christ Consciousness, Episode 1, My Journey of Recovery and Self-Discovery. My name is Ricky Goodall. The Path to Christ Consciousness is a conversation about freedom, peace, unity, and oneness. When I use the term Christ Consciousness, I might also use the term God Consciousness, Krishna Consciousness, Tao Consciousness, Buddha Consciousness, Oneness Consciousness, Unity Consciousness. There are many names to describe this consciousness. And in short, what this consciousness means to me is that I am not actually Ricky Goodall. That's just the character, the identity that I use to navigate around this earth and to interact with other human beings, but that's not actually who or what I am. See, I don't believe that you are just human. I believe that you are God, creator, or conscious universe manifested as the higher self, pretending to be just human. Before I get into this episode today, I just want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I don't think that you should blindly believe anything that I say. I encourage you to question everything. Question me, question your leaders, question your government, question your religious and your education systems, because I believe that truth needs no convincing. It's something that you can feel deep inside. So I share this information not to convince you of anything, but only to inspire you to find a truth that works for you. The music you heard a moment ago is a song I wrote in 2018 called Happiness. When I started connecting to this concept of Christ consciousness, I would pray before playing music, and then I would ask for the sound of certain emotions. And in this case, I asked for what the sound of happiness would sound like. And the song you heard is the music that came through me as I prayed to this Christ consciousness. What I'd like to share in this episode is a really vulnerable confession. And some of the things I'm going to be sharing in this episode might be a little triggering for some people. They might be a little intense to hear, so I just want to warn you and say that this could trigger you. I am on a journey of recovery and self-discovery. I first heard that term in Recovery 2.0, a recovery program to help people recover from different types of addiction. They entertain the definition of addiction that comes from Dr. Gabor Mate, and that is, addiction is any behavior that a person keeps doing even though it causes them pain and suffering. So I've been suffering from or participating in addiction all the way back since I was 8 or 9 years old. Around that time, my parents separated, and my mother would let my brother and I eat junk food, probably a lot more than we should have. She would let us eat it sometimes for breakfast, sometimes for lunch, sometimes for supper, because she felt guilty about my parents' separation. And so I started using food to escape uncomfortable emotions. See, that's what addiction really means to me, is it's a way of escaping uncomfortable emotions, because those uncomfortable emotions show me aspects of myself that I'm not really ready to accept. When I'm living from my false identity or my false persona, the Ricky Goodall character, then it's important for me to maintain an illusion, to maintain an identity so that I can fit in and be accepted and loved by others. And it's a lot of work to maintain this illusion. And so addiction is one of the ways that I have and many other people have behaved in order to avoid dealing with the uncomfortable emotions that come from admitting that I'm not really who I think I am. I'm not really who I pretend to be. I also heard the term that the opposite of addiction is not abstinence. The opposite of addiction is deep connection, deep and vulnerable connection with other human beings and with ourselves and with a higher power. And I learned that it's difficult for me to connect deeply with other human beings, with myself and with a higher power, when I'm not living as my authentic self. When I'm living as my false identity, it's difficult for me to connect deeply with others because I'm maintaining an illusion. I'm maintaining a character or an identity that I created so that I can be loved and accepted by others. Now, we all do this. As soon as we're born with two fundamental needs: the need to be accepted and loved, and the need to be authentic and individual. So we have this one need where we want to be accepted and loved by those around us, but then we have this other need to be an authentic individual human being. And if anything in our childhood happens that makes us think that we can't be our authentic selves, then we will start to modify our behavior so that we can get love and acceptance. This can happen as early as a child crying and the mother not coming to aid the child or nurture the child. If the child thinks that the mother is stressed because it's crying, it might stop crying so that the mother will love it. And in that moment, the child starts modifying its behavior. It starts pretending it's someone it's not so it can get love. And so at 8 or 9 years old, with the pressure of my parents' separation, I started pretending I was okay, even though I wasn't, because I needed to try to maintain an illusion for my family, for my brother, my younger brother, my mother, and the people around me. And so I started using food to escape. I was also using television at that time too. Throughout the rest of my life, I would start using other means, other behaviors to escape my uncomfortable emotions. I would use masturbation or drugs and alcohol, cannabis, plant medicines, and even social media, most recently in the last 10 years, to avoid and escape these uncomfortable emotions. I've caught myself, even on my path of recovery, slipping into these behaviors. Scrolling my social media when really I want to say hello to that person at the coffee shop. Looking at my phone when I'm feeling a little uncomfortable or a little vulnerable in social situations. Staying home in front of the television instead of going out and meeting new people because it's uncomfortable. My journey of substance abuse started really at that 8 or 9 year old age, but then again at 12 years old when I started drinking alcohol. But really it went to the next level in 2005, 2006, when I was homeless and jobless, sleeping on a friend's couch. My friend encouraged me to watch the movie The Secret, the movie about how our thoughts become things and we can manifest the life that we want. And within a year, I became a professional mixed martial arts fighter. The Secret worked for me. I became a pro MMA fighter. And for the first 5 years of my professional fighting career, I was strict. I would not drink. I would not eat junk food. I would stay focused on each fight and each competition for weeks, sometimes even months before each competition. And I would drink a little bit at the after party, which everyone would, but I would get back into training shortly after. But then around 2010, 2011, I noticed that some of my senior teammates were using drugs like cocaine and ecstasy along with alcohol. And I wanted to fit in. I realized later in my career and after my career ended, actually, that I really created this identity as Ricky Goodall, the MMA fighter, when I started competing professionally. Because before that, I was homeless and jobless. I was a nobody. I was just some guy sleeping on somebody's couch. But when I became a professional mixed martial arts fighter and I started winning fights, all of a sudden I was somebody. I was on posters, I was on billboards, I was on pay-per-view television, I was fighting for world championships. Suddenly I became somebody. And then in 2010, 2011, when my teammates were using drugs like cocaine and ecstasy, I started using drugs like cocaine and ecstasy as well, because first I wanted to fit in. Then once I experienced the rush that came with drugs like cocaine, I realized that there was an even higher level I could get to than MMA was giving me. See, if there ever was an addiction for me, it was both an addiction to escaping uncomfortable emotions and an addiction to peak experiences, whether that meant fighting in a cage, fighting in a street, driving my car drunk, driving my car high on cocaine and drinking at the same time. There are lots of different ways that I would create peak experiences for myself, and drugs and alcohol and fighting were just a few of them. Sometimes I would cheat on my girlfriends. Sometimes I would have affairs with married women or women who are in relationships. Sometimes I would steal in my early years. Sometimes I would drink on the job. There are lots of ways that I would chase these peak experiences. And then in 2012, I hit rock bottom. I was in my 16th professional MMA fight, competing in front of thousands of people as the main event in front of a hometown crowd in Halifax, Nova Scotia. My mother was in the audience. My grandfather was in the audience, who was blind and there for my fight to support me, even though he couldn't see. I was about to say blind at the time. He's actually been blind my whole life. He was there in the audience, and so were a pile of other people who knew me. Literally hundreds, maybe thousands of people who knew who I was. It was 3 seconds left of the first round and I got knocked out cold. I was out for 2 minutes. I got up, I did an interview with the post-fight announcer. Then I did another interview outside the cage. with a newspaper. And then I was wheeled out in a stretcher to an ambulance. And to this day, I don't remember any of it. I lost more than 30 minutes of my life that night, and I never got it back. I got rushed to the hospital, and then the doctor asked me if I was okay, and I convinced him I was okay so I could go out and do drugs and alcohol with my friends. I literally was doing cocaine within an hour of being released from the hospital, despite the fact that I was probably suffering from a serious brain injury. My life got really tough after that. My girlfriend broke up with me. I started getting insecure and jealous. I became obsessed with her. I was emailing her and texting her and showing up at places that she was at, getting in fights with people that she was on dates with. It got to the point where she actually had to put a peace bond on me so I wouldn't bother her anymore. I was so depressed and overwhelmed from the drug abuse and the intense emotions that I was experiencing that I started using cannabis regularly. Cannabis became a way of medicating these intense feelings. I didn't realize that the reason that I was so obsessed with my ex-girlfriend wasn't because I really wanted the relationship back that badly. It was because I was experiencing unprocessed emotions from my childhood. After my parents split up in my early years, I was taken to foster care out of my mother's custody. The experience was devastating for me. My brother got to stay home, and I had to go to foster care for 9 months. I never lived with my mother for a long time after that. I stayed with her for short periods of time in my later teenage years, but I ended up living with my father after I got out of foster care. So the first woman in my life abandoned me for another man, my brother who got to stay home, and her new boyfriend who she started dating after her and my dad broke up. The unprocessed emotions from this experience were still stored inside my body. And every time a girl would break up with me, they would get triggered. And I would go into a fit. I would become obsessed, overwhelmed with needing my partner back, even if I didn't want to be in that relationship anymore. So cannabis became a way for me to medicate the pain that I was feeling. And so after this girlfriend broke up with me, I went back to the movie The Secret again, because I wanted to try to attract my ex-girlfriend back. I knew that The Secret worked, but for some reason it wasn't working for me, because I could attract these things in my life, but then I would lose them. I was attracting an MMA career, but then I was losing my fights. I was attracting girlfriends, dating models and dating really attractive women, but then I was losing the relationships for some reason. So there was something missing. I started digging into the stars in the movie The Secret, and I started learning what they were learning and what they learned in their lives and the practices they implemented into their lives. Practices like meditation, hypnosis, psychology, therapy. I started learning about quantum science. I started learning about shamanism and other forms of spirituality. From 2012 to 2015, I obsessed with the law of attraction and manifestation. I read books like Think and Grow Rich and As a Man Thinketh and different law of attraction videos and articles. And I just obsessed with the topic. I eventually opened a wellness center after I retired from my professional fighting career in 2014. I opened a wellness center, and for a little while, things went really great. The wellness center started to take off. I wasn't using drugs as regularly as I was before, but I didn't have a fighting career to keep me structured anymore. So I was always just hanging on the edge. I was on a thin line with my lifestyle. I didn't have the structure that I had in my fighting career because now I was retired. So I started slipping with my diet, slipping with my drinking, and slipping with my drug use. So here I am using cocaine and ecstasy, but running a wellness center on the surface. So according to people during my day job, I was this guy running a wellness center, but then behind closed doors at night, I was doing cocaine and drinking alcohol behind my clients and my customers' backs, essentially. I was even using company money for drugs and alcohol behind my business partner's back. Once he found that out, he decided to leave the business. I cheated on my girlfriend, and she figured that out, and she eventually left me as well. So here I am with a wellness center that's sinking fast. I've got more bills than I have income. I was burning more bridges than I was creating, and I was in over my head. The business was so close to failing, and then out of nowhere, a ceremonial high magician came into my life. Ceremonial high magic is a practice that has been essentially suppressed for thousands of years. And I'll talk a little bit more about what high magic is shortly, but I want to keep moving through this introduction here before I get there. So I started practicing high magic. And before this high magician came into my life, I had a shaman come into my life and put me through some plant medicine ceremonies that were very powerful. But this high magician took it to another level. He initiated me into this ancient practice and showed me how to perform these very powerful magic ceremonies. And these magic ceremonies connected me to higher levels of my own consciousness. It helped me see my life from a higher perspective. I started to recognize that in my relationships with women, I had this pattern where in the beginning of the relationship, I would cheat on them, I would lie to them, I would push them away. And then eventually I would let them get close to me, and then I would develop an attachment to them. But then as the relationship would progress, I would feel guilty for my behavior in the beginning of the relationship, the cheating, the lying, the going out behind their back. And I would start to get jealous, insecure, and controlling, and I would eventually sabotage the relationship. I would have this fear that they're eventually going to leave me. And then my behavior would end up causing me to manifest that exact situation. In my high magic initiation ceremony, I recognized that that was exactly what I was doing. I was recreating the same problems over and over and over again. You see, I was afraid of my girlfriends leaving me because of what happened to me in my childhood. I was afraid that my girlfriends would leave me like I perceived that my mother left me when I was taken to foster care. And so I would sabotage the relationship early on. Then as the relationship would develop, I would continue to sabotage it out of fear that they were going to leave me. So first I would sabotage it to try to encourage them to leave me, but I wouldn't actually tell them I was doing these things. It was all unconscious. It wasn't something I was really aware of. Then eventually I would start to get jealous, insecure, or controlling, and they would eventually leave me. And this happened multiple times in my life. But finally with this relationship, I started to recognize the pattern, thankfully because of high magic. I eventually closed my wellness center. I was able to get out of a 5-year lease shortly after my initiation ceremony. Somebody donated $50,000 to me so I could get out of debt and pay off a lot of the back bills in the business. The same person also bought me a car because my car had broken down. I didn't have a car anymore. I was walking around, working at this wellness center 50 to 60 hours a week, picking up stock with taxis and getting it couriered because I didn't have a way to go pick up the materials and the supplies that I needed. So I closed this wellness center, and then shortly after started digging into and researching shamanism. The experience I had with the shaman was very powerful, but he wasn't an indigenous shaman. I wanted to experience the real deal. So in May of 2016, I traveled to Cusco, Peru, and experienced my first ayahuasca ceremonies. Now, for those of you who don't know, ayahuasca is a shamanic plant medicine brew brewed in the Amazon jungle. It's made from 2 different plants, the ayahuasca vine and the chacruna leaf. And when brewed together for about 8 hours, these 2 plants create a very powerful psychedelic brew, a psychedelic tea, that when ingested causes purging like vomiting and diarrhea, crying, laughing, screaming. And it also creates very powerful hallucinogenic visions. So these hallucinations can show an individual how to heal themselves. And so in my first experience in Peru, which was May of 2016, I had some profound experiences. I learned that I needed to nurture the roots if I wanted to heal. I had to heal my relationships to my family. I had to forgive the people who hurt me. I had to ask for forgiveness from the people that I hurt. And I also had to forgive myself. I started learning the importance of forgiveness. I'm not going to go deeply into my experiences in Peru. I tell them in detail in my audiobook, The Rise of the Authentic Self. At the time of recording this first episode, October 18, 2021, you can still get that book on YouTube for free. So if you look up Ricky Goodall, The Rise of the Authentic Self, you can find that book. It's completely free to listen to. It's about 6 hours long. It's an audiobook. I'm going to have that book put on Audible soon. I'm going to add a bonus ending chapter because a lot has changed. I only released it a year ago, but a lot has changed since then. So May of 2016, I went to Peru for the first time. And when I came back from Peru, I started working with a high-level spiritual mindset coach who was an expert in homeopathic medicine and somatic trauma healing. So this coach started teaching me how my past, my unhealed childhood past, was still affecting my present behavior. I learned that up to 75% of my core beliefs are formed in my childhood. So up to 75% of my beliefs about life and about relationships and about happiness and health and finances were all formed in my childhood. And up to 95% of my decisions every day, which create my reality, are based on those core beliefs that I formed in my childhood. So unless I heal and process and reprogram the beliefs I formed in my childhood, then I'm going to be recreating my past over and over and over and over again. So this coach started teaching me not only how to do it for myself, how to reprogram my own beliefs and process my own unprocessed, unhealed emotions, but also how to lead other people how to do it as well. So I was apprenticed by this coach for a year and learned how to perform these very powerful coaching sessions that allow me to lead other people through the process of healing their past. In October of 2016, I went back to Peru again for a second time and asked the shamans if they could give me enough ayahuasca so I never have to take ayahuasca again. In that experience, I was given a massive dose of ayahuasca, and I experienced some profound visions that helped me understand myself, my connection to God, creator, or conscious universe, my purpose, my potential as a human being. And it was the beginning of me understanding this concept of Christ consciousness. I was shown visions in that ceremony that helped me understand Christ consciousness from a scientific perspective. I was specifically told to study ancient forms of mysticism rooted in Hebrew and Egyptian and other forms, Gnosticism, Greek, and all these other forms. And again, I tell this story in detail in my book, The Rise of the Authentic Self. But I was shown specific visions. And from 2016 until 2018, I obsessed about learning how to heal myself. I continued working with this coach. I continued working with a family of shamans from Peru. I continued working with other healers, and I studied as many healing modalities as I could. I studied behavioral psychology. I studied quantum science. I studied ancient Hebrew Kabbalah and Egyptian alchemy. I studied Greek Gnosticism. I studied Catholicism, Christianity, Taoism, Hinduism. As much as I could, I studied whatever I felt guided to study. And in April of 2018, while performing a high magic ceremony, I suddenly had a memory come to the surface. I was in a cannabis ceremony. I was using cannabis as the plant medicine, performing a high magic ceremony. Again, high magic is a very specific type of healing magic. Again, I'll get into the details before I finish this video of what high magic is and how to understand it. But it's a specific type of practice that allows me to connect to higher levels of my consciousness. So when I went to this higher level of consciousness, I was able to see traumas that happened to me in my childhood that I'd forgotten about. One of them being a sexual trauma that happened at 3 years old. And suddenly when this memory came to the surface, it came with a whole pile of intense symptoms. I essentially opened Pandora's box. All of a sudden, I was experiencing symptoms of what we call complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I was angry, I was depressed, I was anxious, I was socially anxious, I was hypervigilant, I was paranoid, I was eating food that I hadn't eaten in a long time, I was smoking weed every day, I gained 60 pounds. I knew that I needed help. I couldn't do it by myself. So I went back to Peru again in August of 2018 for my 6th and 7th ayahuasca ceremonies. These ceremonies were profound in 2 ways. One, Mother Ayahuasca said, this is the spirit of the plant medicine. She said, what are you here for? I already showed you how to heal yourself. Back in October of 2016, she showed me visions of how to heal myself. She showed me what I needed to study and what I needed to do to heal myself. So she said, I'm not going to help you. You already know the way. You already know the path. You already know what you have to do. The next day after my 6th ayahuasca ceremony, I was speaking to the shaman, and I told him about my visions and my experiences. And he said, yes, Mother Ayahuasca told me to tell you that you are a shaman. You are a doctor. You are a master, and you're meant to be doing this work with other people. He said, Mother Ayahuasca comes through your words. She comes through your stories. She comes through when you speak your truth. He said, tonight, in tonight's ceremony, which was my 7th ceremony, I'm going to sing some special icaros and special songs so that I can put Mother Ayahuasca's energy inside of you. And then you can call on her anytime you want to, anytime you need to. So that was in 2018. And from that point forward, I started going even deeper into my healing. I had all of these intense symptoms. My doctor diagnosed me with complex PTSD. I was given a prescription for medical cannabis so I could treat some of these symptoms. And I went down an even deeper journey. Shortly after that, my engagement ended. I was engaged to a woman, and I was a mess. I was angry all the time. I was triggered all the time. I was spending most of my time in ceremony. Between 2016 and 2020, I went through more than 400 shamanic high magic ceremonies using medicines like dimethyltryptamine, cannabis, ayahuasca, San Pedro, psilocybin mushrooms, and others. I went deep into my journey, and I experienced profound visions. And all while this was happening, I was guided by a higher power. I was guided by a higher consciousness, and I didn't know what that higher consciousness was at first. It wasn't until around 2018 and 2019 that the consciousness started to identify itself. And it identified itself as God, creator of conscious universe, and it also identified itself as Christ consciousness. It identified itself as Yeshua or Yaheshua, which I believe is the root word for the word Jesus. And so this consciousness was speaking to me and showing me how to heal myself. And I was rapidly healing these symptoms and moving through this process of letting go of the trauma that was still stuck in my body, causing me to behave in ways that were out of alignment with who I knew myself to be. In 2019, I traveled to Venice Beach, California, just to get away and go on a vacation after my engagement ended. And I went to a breathwork studio. A client of mine told me that he experienced a breathwork technique that for him was comparable to a DMT ceremony. Now, DMT is the active component in ayahuasca, but you can also ingest DMT in different ways. A person can smoke DMT and have a very powerful psychedelic experience. It's a short experience, between 20 and 30 minutes long, but it's incredibly powerful. My client said that he'd experienced breathwork that was comparable to a DMT ceremony, and I didn't believe him. There's no way that you can do that with just your breath, I said. There's no way. And he said, I'm telling you, try this breathwork. You'd be surprised. So I did. I went to Venice Beach, California. I went to a breathwork studio, and I'll tell you, what I experienced in that ceremony was most certainly comparable to a natural DMT experience. I was in another dimension. I felt like I was in heaven on earth. I felt like I was in heaven. It was a profound experience. And so I hired the breathwork instructor to give me a private session, and he did. He put me through a private session and told me that I can practice this work and share it with other people. So in November of 2019, I went back to Nova Scotia, Canada, where I was living at the time, and I opened a wellness center, a retreat center with a business partner and a friend, and we called it the Authenticity Dojo. The whole purpose of this retreat center was to help people unbecome their false identity, unbecome their false character, and discover their true authentic self deep inside, which I believe is our Christ consciousness. Beneath the programming that I started creating in my childhood, all the way back when I was born, beneath that false programming, beneath my limiting beliefs, beneath my fears, beneath my pain, is my true, authentic, higher self, my Christ self, my Krishna self, my Buddha self, my God self, so to speak. Beneath that false programming is who I really am. And when I'm no longer feeling the need to validate myself with external acceptance, when I start validating myself internally, when I start to accept and recognize that my love always comes from inside, it never comes from outside, then I could start living as my true authentic self. And so we opened this retreat center specifically for that reason. And then a few months later, we performed a very powerful ceremony in February of 2020. There were 3 of us in ceremony. We were all initiated high magicians and initiated medicine healers. And we performed a very special ceremony to dedicate as a dedication to Christ consciousness. And in that ceremony, we were raised to a higher dimension. And we experienced life from the perspective of Christ consciousness. Now, we were using plant medicines in the ceremony. We were using psilocybin and cannabis, but this effect lasted for days, long after the plant medicines had worn off. We were in another dimension. And for those of you who have never experienced something like this, I know this might sound out there. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, don't blindly believe anything I say. This is just my experience. This is just my perspective. This is just my truth. I share it not to convince you of anything, only to inspire you to find a truth that works for you. We were raised to this high dimension, and we stayed there for at least 3 days. And then we started to float back down, or I started to float back down to Ricky Goodall's character again. So I was existing as Christ consciousness. I knew that I was one with everything. I knew that everyone was a reflection of me. I knew that everything was a reflection of me, and I was living from that place. My ego was dissolved. I wasn't thinking thoughts anymore. I was living totally present in the moment. I was no longer living in the future or the past. I was completely rooted in the present moment. I knew that I was a child of the Creator, a child of God. I knew that I was living in heaven, that I knew that this world is not as it seems. It's just an illusion. I knew that I was living in heaven on earth. And then I started to float back down to Ricky Goodall's character. Now, the interesting thing is, only a few months later, COVID happened. The pandemic started. And suddenly I'm locked down, locked in this big retreat center, this 5-bedroom house, all by myself, living in this place during lockdown. I stayed there for 3 months. I performed a number of ceremonies there to try to understand what was happening with COVID, because in all honesty, I was scared. I thought I'd broke something when I performed this powerful magic. I thought I did something wrong when I went to this higher dimension. And so my partner and I performed a 3-day silent water fast, no plant medicines, no drugs, no psychedelics, 3 days before Good Friday. So it was a full moon on April 7th. We did a 3-day silent water fast, and the entire 3 days, we didn't speak to each other. We performed it in the same house, the 5-bedroom house, but we didn't speak to each other. We slept in separate rooms, and all we did was drink water and tea for 3 days and meditate, completely silent. And in those 3 days, I was praying and meditating and praying and meditating, and I received visions from Christ consciousness. In fact, during one of my dreams, Jesus showed up to me as his Jesus self, the version that we know of when we think about the man 2,000 years ago. And let me just say, I'm not Christian. I don't think that the man 2,000 years ago was the one and only Son of God in the conventional perspective that Christianity says that he is. Now, if you believe that, I have no disrespect. I have my own beliefs. I have my own understanding. I have a lot of respect for Christianity, for what it's trying to do. I have a lot of respect for Christ. I think the man 2,000 years ago was a very special individual who was able to raise his consciousness until he lived from a place of Christ consciousness. I believe that his name wasn't Jesus. I think his name was Yeshua or Yeshua. And I think that was a title that was given to him because of the state of consciousness he reached. But that's just my understanding. Again, I write this in detail in my book, The Rise of the Authentic Self. And I'll tell you more about that shortly. During this 3-day silent water fast, I received visions from Christ. And he told me that I'm on the right track, that what I'm doing is right. I'm following my intuition. I'm doing what I need to be doing. From 2016 until this time, I'd performed a pile of ceremonies connecting to Christ, speaking to Christ, asking Christ to give me a guidance, give me advice, tell me where to go in my life. If you had told me in 2016 that I was going to start praying to Jesus Christ or to Christ consciousness, I would have said you were crazy. I had a beef against Christianity. I didn't agree with what Christians have done to the indigenous people of Peru and South America and Central America, and even aspects of parts of North America. I didn't agree with how Christianity has suppressed different forms of powerful healing magic. I didn't agree with how witches and shamans were burned at the stake. I didn't agree with how it was forced on so many people. And although I can't say I don't agree with it, because it happened and it happened for a reason, I think. But at the time I didn't agree with it and I was completely against it. I would say I'm not against Christianity. I'm not against anything if I can help it. But I think that it's evolving. I think that the concept of Christ and Christ consciousness is evolving. And I think it's important that we evolve with it. So while this is happening, we go through this 3-day silent water fast. And then from Good Friday until Easter Sunday of 2020 or Easter Monday of 2020, I recorded 4 videos that I was guided to record. And they're on YouTube. They're called the Easter series. You can look those up if you like. And it's interesting because in the first video, my eyes are really sharp. My face is really sharp. My face is really clear. But you can tell when I started using cannabis over that weekend, because my face gets a little rougher. My eyes get a little more hazy. My hair gets a little messier. You can actually see the transition in my facial features, because during this 3-day water fast, I was intending to stop using cannabis. And then as soon as the fast stopped, I didn't use cannabis the first night. And then the second night I did, then the third night, then the fourth night. So you can actually see the transition in my face in that video series. But I was guided to release that video series by God, creator, conscious universe, or by Christ consciousness. And that video series was something that I'd released already before, but I had it hidden on my YouTube channel. If you go to my website, rickygoodall.com, you can find a section called The Path. And The Path is an entire teaching that I channeled between 2016 and 2018 from Christ consciousness. It's an entire ancient teaching. It's an ancient scientific system that helps us understand how we are all Christ consciousness. This teaching is very deep. There are hours of videos that I recorded, and I've done more since. And I've just released a program called The Pilgrimage based on these teachings. But they're there, but I had them hidden. I was too afraid to release them to the public, because I was afraid that people were going to think I was crazy or a heretic or a lunatic, or I was going to be judged, or Christians were going to attack me, or Jews were going to attack me because it challenges Judaism as well, or Catholics were going to attack me. So I had it hidden for a while. But then in Easter, during this 3-day silent water fast, I was encouraged to release it. And so I finally released it again in this 4-part video series. I eventually had to close the retreat center because as you know, lockdown didn't change. Canada stayed locked down. And I eventually had to close the wellness center. And I basically sold almost everything I own. I started living out of just about 3 carloads worth of stuff. I've since downsized even more. Now I only own about 3 suitcases worth of stuff, and I have a car sitting in Canada. I'm currently recording this episode in Tulum, Mexico. Finally, in November of 2020, I recognized that COVID wasn't going away, at least not as quickly as I thought it was. So I released my story, The Rise of the Authentic Self. I told the entire story of what I'd experienced in my 400 plus shamanic ceremonies and my hundreds of coaching sessions, in all of my channeling experiences, all of my experiences being essentially possessed by God. And you can hear that story in that book. But even when I wrote and released that book, I was still struggling with cannabis addiction. In fact, while writing that book, I was in such physical pain because as I was writing, I was purging all of this deep emotional stuff. And if you listen to the book, you can hear it. You can hear it in my voice. There are some points where I'm very emotional. In fact, I couldn't even sit down on my computer and type the book out. It was causing me too much pain. What I did is I laid in bed with a binder and I hand wrote 30 pages of jot notes, of just point form notes. And then when I recorded the book, I spoke it just like I'm speaking to you right now, based on an outline that I had written in handwriting. And I wanted it to be an authentic book because it's called The Rise of the Authentic Self. So I just spoke it. It's not edited, not completely. There are some sections that I re-recorded, but essentially it's not edited. And the book is just completely authentic. It's real. And I'll tell you, when you hear it, the other things that Mother Ayahuasca told me and the other things that I experienced, it's out there. It's really out there. And I've lost some relationships as a result of putting this truth out there in the world, but it's important because it is the truth. It's my truth. And so finally I released that book, and then COVID continued happening. And then eventually in 2021, early 2021, it's still 2021 now, but I started to get really tired of being locked down in Nova Scotia. I could see that other parts of the world weren't locked down. Costa Rica wasn't locked down. Mexico wasn't locked down. Parts of Sweden and Switzerland, I believe, weren't locked down. There were other parts of the world that were opened up. So COVID didn't make sense to me. Now, I don't know where you stand on COVID. I don't know if you believe that the measures are necessary. I don't know if you believe that masks and vaccines are necessary. If you do, that's fine. That's your opinion. I don't believe it's necessary personally because I believe that we are superhuman. I believe that we are far more powerful than we've been led to believe. So in June of 2021, I sold my dream guitar. I sold all my music equipment. I sold just almost everything I own except for my most important valuables. And my partner and I moved to Costa Rica. And in our first week of Costa Rica, we went to Rhythmia Life Advancement Center. It's an ayahuasca retreat center. And I went through 4 more ayahuasca ceremonies, again, trying to heal myself of this cannabis addiction. I wanted to get rid of this cannabis dependency. Medical cannabis was such a blessing in my life going through my journey. It was such a blessing going through my deep healing and my trauma healing. And I'm so grateful for the blessings it's brought into my life. But as my recovery coach said, it would add richness and depth to my life, but then it started to make my life more narrow. And for me, it started to make my life more dull and more shallow. And so I wanted to get rid of it, but I was really struggling with it. So we went to Rhythmia. I went through 4 ayahuasca ceremonies, and I didn't really get much from the ayahuasca ceremonies because, as I told you, Mother Ayahuasca already told me, I've given you everything I can give you. You're going to have to do this on your own. You're going to have to figure this out in a different way. I can't help you from this point forward. So my partner and I, first I moved to Nosara, Costa Rica, which is a blue zone. It's a very powerful healing area in Costa Rica. It's elevated healing, long lifespans, very simple life. And I had a really challenging time there because I was still struggling with this cannabis addiction, but my higher self was telling me to let it go. So I wasn't living in alignment. I crashed a motorcycle, burnt my leg really badly. I literally almost drowned in the Costa Rican Ocean, Playa Guiones. I got caught in a riptide. I got pulled out into the ocean. I wasn't a strong swimmer at the time. I tried to fight the current, which you can't do. You can't fight a riptide. So I tried to fight it, or I should say most people can't fight a riptide. I know some of them aren't too strong, but sometimes they can get so strong that they're faster than an Olympic swimmer could swim. And I'm not an Olympic swimmer. I tried to fight the current and I exhausted myself and I got stuck, and there were 8 to 10 foot waves crashing over top of me and I wasn't able to breathe. Thankfully, I didn't swallow any water, but my oxygen levels got so low that I started to black out. Actually, I didn't black out. It was a whiteout. Everything started to go white. And I was praying to God, God, what are you doing to me? Get me out of here. And I was praying to the element water, Archangel Gabriel, element of water, please save me. Please get me out of here. And there was a moment where I knew that I wasn't going to get out of that water by myself. I had to tell my partner, like, go in, please go get me help. And she said, no, you're okay. You can swim out. And I said, no, I can't swim. My arms aren't working. My legs aren't working. I'm stuck. You have to get me help. So she had to swim back into the shore. She had to fight the current. She had to do backstroke, which I didn't know how to do at the time. And she did backstroke to get into the shore. And it was really difficult for her to even get in. And then finally, I'm in the middle of the ocean. I don't even remember this happening because I was so out of it. But at some point, a woman said, grab my board. And that's the next thing I remember. And so I held onto her board and she swam back in and we were fighting the current and fighting the waves. Finally, I get into the shore and I can't stand up. I can't see anything. My oxygen levels are so low. I get rushed to the Nicoya Hospital, which is about an hour and a half away or an hour away when you're driving at regular speed. They have me on oxygen. They put me on the IV and I almost died that day. The paramedics said that I was minutes away from death. And I was using cannabis that day. In fact, I was using cannabis and a microdose of the LSD that day. And I almost drowned. It's like, what more do I need? What bigger messages do I need to let go of this addiction? But I couldn't let it go. And I continued to use cannabis after that. I was so traumatized by the experience of almost drowning that I went into a really dark place for a little bit. So my partner and I had a plan to do a visa run. When you're in Costa Rica, you can only stay for 3 months. And after 3 months, you have to leave the country and then come back. You can literally leave for 1 day and then come back. But we originally planned to go to Mexico before we were booked to go to Costa Rica, but our flights got canceled because of COVID. So we decided to go to Mexico. And I wanted to experience something powerful. I wanted to try to heal this addiction to cannabis. So we booked ourselves for a 2-day Bufo or 3-day Bufo ceremony, a Bufo retreat at a Bufo sanctuary. So Bufo is 5-MeO DMT. It's a very powerful psychedelic medicine. It comes from the Bufo alvarius toad. I think I'm pronouncing that properly. And it's not technically a plant medicine. It's a psychedelic medicine, and it comes from a toad. It's toad venom, essentially. And so we get to this retreat, and I was scared. The last time I'd used DMT, I received the insight from the medicine, from the DMT medicine, that if I go any deeper, I'm not coming back. And I was scared. I didn't want to come back. I had some really scary DMT experiences, which I talk about in my book. I did DMT a number of times by myself, which I do not suggest for anyone. And there was one experience where I thought I was in hell, and I thought I was gone forever. It was terrifying. And so that was the last time I'd used DMT. So right before I'm about to go into my first Bufo ceremony, that memory comes up. And so I tell the organizer, like, here's what happened. I'm scared. He's like, don't worry, you're going to come back. And so he gives me a really large dose of Bufo because he knew about my experience with MMA, mixed martial arts. He knew about my experience in shamanic ceremony. He wanted to give me a big dose so I could get what I came for. And again, my intention was to heal my cannabis addiction. And I also wanted to experience unconditional love because I hadn't felt that. I wasn't able to retain that feeling. I experienced it in ayahuasca ceremonies and mushroom ceremonies and DMT ceremonies, but I wasn't able to retain it. So I wanted to be able to retain that experience. So in the first Bufo ceremony, I became God. I became pleasure. I became love. I realized that God is just manifesting everything for its own pleasure, and that we are manifestations of God. We are essentially children of God, and I've experienced this before, but the way I experienced with Bufo was so profound, it shook my consciousness. And I became pure pleasure, pure love, pure bliss, but then it started to get to be too much. It was overwhelming and it was chaotic and it was confusing, and I thought I was in hell, and I was stuck and I was crying and I was saying, please, what is this? Please, please, I want to go home. No, please, it's too overwhelming. Please, I want to get out. And I kept seeing the 6-pointed star, the tetragrammaton, the seal of Solomon, the Star of David. And you'll understand the significance of that symbol in my book, The Rise of the Authentic Self. And I was terrified. I thought I was gone forever. I thought I was in hell. And then suddenly I could see Amy, the co-organizer, I could see her face. And she said, okay, you're back with us. You're here. So, oh my God. And then I look around, I see George, one of the guys that was there, and I start to see everything, and I come out of the experience. I was so scared, and I just started crying and saying, oh my God, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to be home. I'm so grateful to be in this life. I was shown pure pleasure, and then I was shown pure chaos, pure confusion, pure suffering, so that I could have gratitude for this life that I'm experiencing right now as Ricky Goodall. So the next day, the final Bufo ceremony, again, I was terrified. I was so scared. I realized that my fear of not coming home was rooted in my childhood when I went to foster care, because I was afraid that I was never going to get to come home. And so that pain, that trauma was still in my nervous system, and the Bufo was helping me release it, but it was so painful, so terrifying. So in that day's ceremony, again, I was the one that went first, and I got the really massive dose. And as soon as I went into the Bufo ceremony, I look around, I could still see everyone, even though I was high on Bufo. And I thought I was in heaven. It's like, oh my God, I'm home. I'm here. I'm in heaven. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so glad to be here. But then things started to get really weird again. They started to get really confusing and really chaotic, and everything was swirling. And I thought I was in hell. And I was looking around at all of the people. There were about 8 people there with us, including Julia, my partner. I was looking around at everyone. I was like, oh my God, I'm so confused. Where am I? Am I in hell? What is this? Am I in hell? And Amy, the co-facilitator, she said, are you in hell? And when she said it, I thought that I was. I thought she was confirming. I was like, oh my God, am I in hell? What is this? Please, am I in hell? And she said, it's your choice. I said, what? She said, it's your choice. And I looked around, I found Julia, and I looked her in the face. I said, Julia, where am I? What is this? Is it heaven or is it hell? And she opened her eyes and she looked at me and she said, love is the answer. Love is the answer. And I was so scared. I thought they were messing with me. I thought it was just this terrible, chaotic, confusing experience. And then suddenly Gabrielle, which is the owner of the retreat center, that's his name, Gabrielle, he grabs me by the face and he looks me in the eyes and he says, brother, you're home. You're safe. It's okay. And I just started crying and crying and crying. It's making me emotional now as I'm saying it. I was so grateful to be back, so grateful to be home, so grateful to be here. Because no matter what's happening around us, no matter what's happening around me, I still have myself. I still have my connection to the divine. I still have my life. I still have my family. I still have my loved ones. I still have my friends. I still have this experience. And I'm so, so grateful. So grateful to be here. So grateful to be here. So when we left this sanctuary, literally the day we left, we went to Merida, Mexico, and I found cannabis that day. My intuition was saying, no, don't use it. Don't use cannabis. You're done. But I did anyway. I got it anyway. And from September, I think it was 6th, until 16 days ago, I used cannabis every day. And what I didn't know, which I now know, is that cannabis reactivates Bufo. So I essentially experienced almost a full month Bufo ceremony. I was going through chaos. I was going through such pain. I was confused every day. I thought I was in hell. I was having a spiritual crisis. I was having a hard time staying focused in reality. Every time I would smoke weed, I'd go into this dark, dark, dark place. While I was sober, I wouldn't be there. I would be okay when I was sober, but as soon as I got high, as soon as I smoked weed, I was in this terrifying, chaotic, confusing place. And so finally, 16 days ago, or I guess it was 15 days ago, it was 2 weeks ago, yesterday, Sunday, today's Monday as I'm recording this, I had to stop. So no more, I can't do this to myself anymore. And I reached out to a recovery coach and reached out to a recovery community. And it was really difficult coming off of cannabis because I asked a coach to help me. And the coach basically just told me I need to go easy on myself. Medical cannabis is helpful. I was having a really hard time getting people to take me seriously about wanting to come off of this cannabis addiction. So 2 weeks ago, the last time I used cannabis, I went to a recovery meeting online, high on cannabis, my first recovery meeting. And the guy that was leading the meeting, it was my very first meeting ever going as somebody who's struggling with addiction. And the guy leading the meeting had overcome cannabis addiction. And he was telling his story. And I could feel from his energy that he was happy. And that was my biggest fear, is that I'm never going to be able to be happy if I come off of cannabis, because cannabis was one of the first times I could ever really feel happy. It helped me feel happy when most of my life I just felt stressed and overwhelmed and anxious and unhappy and lonely. Cannabis medicated a lot of those uncomfortable feelings, but he helped me believe that I can recover. I can recover from all of these addictions, not just cannabis, but television and social media and food and whatever other kind of ways that I've escaped uncomfortable emotions. And so Bufo did its job. It helped me quit cannabis once and for all because I'm actually scared to use it now. It took me into such a dark place that I don't want to use it anymore. I want to experience a natural high. I want to be able to get high on life. And so I'm on a challenge now to not use any plant medicines or any intoxicants for at least a year. And I have a feeling that once I go a year, I'm going to go a lot longer. And to just get high through my breath, which I know how to do now. I know how to use my breath to get really, really high. And believe me, my friends, there are techniques that we can learn with just our breath where we can get just as high, if not higher, than what cannabis and DMT can do for us because we're doing it ourselves. So my ego would fight the experience when I would experience plant medicine experiences because I wasn't doing it to myself. But when I experienced it through my breath, that was unforgettable. I couldn't argue that. It was something that was happening inside of me. I learned that below these uncomfortable emotions that I kept running from, below those uncomfortable emotions is my true authentic self. That's my heaven on earth. From that place, I feel at home everywhere I go. I can make friends anywhere. I can connect deeply with people anywhere in the world, even if I don't speak their language. I can show up and really love myself no matter what's happening outside of me. I can heal my relationships to my family. I can heal my relationships to loved ones. I can forgive myself for things I've done in the past. And I can forgive others for things that they've done to me. I truly believe that the future of humanity is a future of authenticity where we're living from our true, authentic, higher selves, our Christ selves, our Krishna selves, our Buddha selves. I believe that we all have the potential to reach this state of consciousness. As the layers come off, my true self begins to emerge. And I got really deep while I was using cannabis. I was able to find a lot of these traumas and heal a lot of this pain, start to discover my authentic self, but I wasn't able to really get to the deeper level. Now, as the days go by, I'm not saying it's not challenging. I'm not saying I haven't had temptations to go back to cannabis. What I'm saying is that I'm committed. I'm committed to discovering who I really am. I've been following a very specific healing path, the path that I channeled from Christ consciousness, from God, creator of conscious universe. Again, you can find it on my website. I'm going to share a masterclass with you at the end of this call, at the end of this episode, that's going to help you understand the basics of it. But I've been following a very specific healing path that I received in multiple ceremonies after studying esoteric wisdom and being initiated into high magic. And this path leads to Christ consciousness. It helped me heal these symptoms of PTSD. It helped me forgive and heal my relationships to family. It helped me live a number of my dreams that I hadn't been able to access before. It helped me discover hidden talents. It helped me feel at home literally everywhere I go. It's helped me heal my need to please, my people-pleasing patterns and seeking validation. It's helping me find love within myself instead of outside of myself. It's helping me heal codependency in my relationships. If you're not familiar with codependency, that was a humbling lesson for me, learning how my patterns in relationships were either to have walls up and not let people get close or have no boundaries at all. And that was as a result of the experiences I had in my childhood. So addiction was a way for me to medicate the pain I was feeling from not having boundaries. But the more I create healthy boundaries, the better I feel. I'm still on the path, but this path works. And there are many paths, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you need to follow my path, but the path that I was given is actually a quantum path. Whether you follow Buddhism or Hinduism, or whether you follow Taoism, or whether you follow Kabbalistic path or alchemical path, or whether you don't follow any of them, the path that I was shown is a scientific path. It actually plugs into all of these paths and it makes them make sense. It's based in ancient high magic. Now, as I was saying earlier, high magic is really interesting because there are actually three types of magic. When my mentor asked me if he could initiate me into high magic, I thought, are you talking about like black magic, like witchcraft? Like, are you talking about putting curses and hexes on people? And he laughed and he said, well, that's one type of magic, but that's not the only type of magic. There are multiple types of high magic. If you just heard a little notification, I have my computer sound on. You might have heard some notifications, so just ignore that. I'm not going to re-record this episode now. I'm just going to be authentic, and it's Instagram notifications that I didn't realize were turned on my computer. If you didn't hear anything, then just ignore what I said. You didn't hear anything. There are three types of magic. There's black magic or low magic, which is like the magic of putting curses and hexes on people. But that magic is actually a trap. It's a trap to suck people in who are not worthy, who are not leading a path toward oneness and unity and heaven on earth. It's considered magic for the unworthy. In alchemy, they call it puffer magic. It's magic to suck you into the abyss. And everything you put out comes back to you 3 or 10-fold. So if you do a spell to try to hurt someone or manipulate somebody or take something from somebody, it comes back 3-fold. It comes back even worse to you. In the beginning of my magic career, I wasn't very humble, and I wished for something that wasn't mine to wish for, and I got really humbled as a result. I got my ass tuned, and I talk about it in my book, The Rise of the Authentic Self. And then there's middle magic or gray magic, which is the magic like law of attraction, where I'm trying to attract what I want to me. But high magic, also known as white magic, is a magic where I don't try to attract things to me. I just heal my internal world, and all of my desires come to me. All of my true heart desires, they just manifest. I don't have to try to attract things to me. I don't have to try to effort things to me. It just happens. I do the deep work internally, and my external world changes. Like if you've ever heard of religious or spiritual leaders like Jesus or Moses or King Solomon or King David or the Buddha or Muhammad or Paramahansa Yogananda, they were all high magicians. They were all high magicians. High magic has been suppressed by the government, religious, and education systems for thousands of years. But high magic, most of you listening to this probably already practice basic forms of high magic. Prayer, meditation, yoga, visualization, breathwork. These are all forms of high magic. These are all high magic techniques, but there is an actual system of high magic, and it's a scientific system based on the fabric of reality. It's based on the elements of reality. The entire universe is based on 5 very simple elements: fire, air, water, earth, and ether. And high magic is working with these elements because you are the elements, and your external world is also the elements. So high magic is all about connecting to your relationship to these elements, healing your own internal elements so your external elements change. And I know that's deep. I'm not going to go any deeper into that today. In fact, I'm getting ready to wrap up this episode, so I'm going to kind of leave it there. I'm on a mission to inspire 1 billion people to discover high magic so they can dissolve their false identity and discover their true authentic self, so that we can create a free, peaceful, and prosperous world. If enough of us, and 1 billion is way more than enough, trust me, if enough of us discover our authentic selves, we will create heaven on earth, my friends. Mark my words. I'm going to see it in my lifetime. Whether or not you're coming with me depends on whether or not you're willing to do the work. That's it. You're going to create the reality that's aligned with your life, and I'm going to create the reality that's aligned with my life. Whether or not we're in the same reality is whether or not we are aligned together. And so it's my mission and my purpose and my passion to share this truth with others. I've been given a gift. I've been given a gift of a divine vision of heaven on earth, and it's my purpose and duty to share it with others. Because when I share it, I feel high like I've never been high before. I feel high like no drug or alcohol could ever give me. I feel high like no food could ever give me. When I speak my truth and I share it authentically and passionately, oh, it lights me up like nothing else. So that's why I've created this podcast, this webcast, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be sharing my path to Christ consciousness, not to be dogmatic, not to tell you that you need to follow me. In fact, I encourage you to question me. Question everything that I teach you here, everything I share with you. Question it all, test it out in your own life, and find a truth that works for you. I'll leave you with just a couple of resources and one phrase. As within, so without is the most important phrase I've ever learned in my magical career. As within, so without. My internal world creates my external world. My external world is a reflection of my internal world. I'm just going to leave you with that. There are a couple of resources I'd like to share with you. First of all, if you check in the description of this video, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see some links in the description. One is a link directly to my book, The Rise of the Authentic Self, the YouTube video. Again, remember, I was using cannabis while I recorded that book. So it's still very authentic and very powerful. And I believe it has a lot of value to offer, but I was still in my cannabis addiction when I was releasing that book. Another link is a masterclass I just released the other day called How to Understand High Magic So You Can Manifest Inner Peace and Freedom. It breaks down the basics of high magic and helps you understand why it's so important and how it can transform your life. It's a scientific system that's been suppressed by our scientific system. It's ancient. Every spiritual and scientific system on the planet is based on this system. It's based on this philosophy. Aristotle, Plato, Sir Isaac Newton, Henry Ford, they all studied this stuff. They all studied it. Nikola Tesla, Napoleon Hill, they all studied this stuff. It's science. It's science. You can't argue it. You can't prove it wrong. It's just been hidden from us. That's it. So check out that masterclass. I highly encourage you to do. If you watch that masterclass, I'm going to send you a free video course called A Simple Way to Understand. Now, I've got some feedback. I'm working on the funnel right now for that masterclass. I'm working on the lead box because some people who have an iPhone are having trouble signing up for it. It might be fixed by the time you listen to this, but if you try it with an iPhone and you can't get into it, try it again from a computer and it should work just fine. If it doesn't work, send me a message to ricky@rickygoodall.com and I'll sign you up for it directly. Send me a message and I can get you set up for that. And finally, there's another link to the Path to Christ Consciousness Facebook group. There's about 400 people in that group as at the recording of this video. My intention is to get that group to thousands of people so that we can share this path, we can hold our vision, hold intentions, and create the world that we deserve. We deserve heaven on earth, my friends. We already have the resources to create it. We have free energy. We have cures for all sicknesses and disease. We already have the technology. All we need is community so that we can share it with one another. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for giving me a place to share my passions and my gifts. I'm so grateful that you've been here with me. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to listen to my story. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe for future episodes, and I'll see you very soon.